Hey, what's going on, guys? At the UFC 299 post-fight press conference, Dana White was finally asked, miraculously, about Francis Ngannou's boxing career post-UFC. And luckily, I remember everything because I pulled up some older clips of Dana White from many, many years ago that exposes him for the massive hypocrisy of the way he acted about Francis Ngannou's loss to Anthony Joshua. And he finally breaks his silence on Francis Ngannou versus Tyson Fury because Dana White never talked about it and the MMA media never asked him about it because Francis Ngannou was successful in that match. So they waited and waited and waited and waited. And finally, Dana got his opportunity to crap on Francis Ngannou. And to be honest, I think Dana White, while he's happy as hell, he's coping massively about the post-UFC success that Francis Ngannou has had. And I can't wait to look at all these clips I'm going to show you in this video because I pulled up some very old clips of Dana White that just shows how hypocritical he is and just completely petty and spiteful towards Francis Ngannou. Now, we're going to start off with a couple other interesting clips from the UFC 299 post-fight presser because there was a couple other notable things for this presser. The main thing we're going to look at is the Francis Ngannou thing, but let's go through a couple things I wanted to point out from this presser since I'm making this video. There was a comment, and this comment didn't really sit right with me. It's about, we only match make the best in the world, and also, quick note, Power Slap Cup is back in full effect. But let's listen to what he has to say about their matchmaking in the UFC.
We don't determine whether you lose or whether you win. You do. What we try to do is put on the best match-made fight that we can possibly do. And that's why big stars are built in the UFC and legendary fights happen every weekend.
He had the audacity to say this after booking Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Vera too. Is this some kind of sick joke? I mean, Marlon Vera barely squeaked by Pedro Munoz and got dominated by Corey Sandhagen not that long ago. So that's crazy to say. This is the best matchmaking we've ever done, and that's what we do here. I know they do that. I know they do build stars and everything, but I just thought that was hypocritical at this post-fight presser. Then another kind of short remark about Michael Venom Page, which I thought was very telling about the way the UFC does bring along talent, and I thought this was interesting.
Yeah, listen, he's got that style that's very, he's a counter striker and flashy, and we got to matchmake his next fight the right way.
Did you feel like Kevin?
So there you go. You heard it from Dana White. We got to matchmake MVP the right way, which honestly, I don't mind. I don't mind at all. It's not like MVP's a champion. I hope they do matchmake him. But basically what he's saying there, we got to keep MVP away from grapplers is essentially what he's saying. Maybe it's going to be a Wonderboy Thompson. Maybe it could be an Ian Machado Gary. I don't know. I think it probably should be like a Jeff Neal next. But I thought that was interesting. And then next up, and this is going to make Michael Chandler's skin crawl right here. He was asked about Conor McGregor. So we know Chandler's watching this right now. So he was asked about Conor McGregor returning in June and then also fighting the Sphere against Nate Diaz, which Conor McGregor earlier this week said. And Dana White almost gives basically a non-answer here.
Conor McGregor says he still wants to fight in June, and he also mentioned he wanted to fight Nate Diaz in the Sphere on Mexican Independence Day.
I didn't realize I had the question in there. I must have took the wrong timestamp, but you get the point. You'll hear him in a second.
Either of those two interest you?
I'm looking for Mexicans at the Sphere on Mexican Independence Day.
Nate.
Huh?
Nate Diaz.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I'm not doing that fight.
The reason I wanted to include this is, one, he never answers about June, but two, he just blindly dismissed Nate Diaz. What I find telling about that is Nate Diaz was at UFC 299. They never showed him on the broadcast. So I wonder if Nate Diaz and Dana White were in negotiations. That's been rumored for a while, and I wonder if they realize we're not bringing Nate back. Nate's too hard to deal with. Nate's not worth it, whatever it may be, but just completely shoots down the idea immediately and gives no other relevant information on Conor McGregor's return. Now next, finally Dana White's asked about Francis Ngannou, which I find hilarious because if you go back to when he fought Tyson Fury and whatnot, there was no questions about it. No questions. Dana did a softball interview with some weird, like, casual type podcast. I don't remember exactly what it was, where he was just very briefly asked about it, and then the MMA media never brought up Francis Ngannou versus Tyson Fury ever to Dana White. There's no clips of it anywhere. But now, the day after Francis Ngannou gets brutally KO'd by Anthony Joshua, now finally Dana White is asked about it. And man, his response was everything I've ever imagined it to be. First off, he tries to pretend like he didn't watch it, but we'll get to it. He says eventually he admits to seeing it.
Boxing match last night. Did you talk to Eddie after it?
I did not. I mean, I saw it on social media. Yeah.
He saw it on social media. He didn't see. He ordered that pay-per-view. Well, he probably didn't order. He probably bootlegged it. Streamed it, illegally streamed it. Even though he's going to go to federal fucking prison.
Make of that finish in the Francis fight.
By the way, who's this media member? I think I recognize this voice. Does this guy work for MMA Fighting? Like, I don't want to call people out by name, and I don't know if he was there. I'm assuming he was there. The next event Dana White was at after Francis Ngannou basically beat Tyson Fury. But yeah, Dana White kind of said, oh yeah, I saw it on social media, blah, blah, blah. What'd you make of that finish? Let me give you a boner, Dana, by bringing up Francis Ngannou getting KO'd, and watch Dana's response here. But talk about clowns. The MMA media is spineless. Maybe this guy wasn't there, but just as a blanket statement, the MMA media is spineless. They knew that. Think about how crazy this is. These guys are reporters. These guys are journalists. Francis Ngannou is one of the biggest stories, right? He goes out there and shocks the world against Tyson Fury. Even if you thought he lost, he had a super competitive match. They never asked Dana about it ever because they knew it would upset him. They were scared of him. They bowed down to him and said, oh, we're not going to ask him about Francis. But the second they're like, oh, he doesn't like Francis because Francis left the UFC. Now Francis got KO'd. Let me ask about it. And not only that, let me ask follow-up questions on it so I can really get him aroused over it. And watch Dana's response here.
What do you mean? What did I make? Yeah, what did I make of it?
Would you...
Look at his shit-eating grin. Look how happy he is. He's like, oh, yes, the guy who, wanted to make a better life for himself, got brutally KO'd. Let me smile and laugh about it. Yeah, oh yeah, that's cool.
Saw it like it was. People are saying it's one of the more violent knockouts in boxing history.
Yeah, I mean, going into the Fury fight, if Fury trained for the fight and didn't show up and look like he ate Tyson Fury.
Look at that, coping with the Francis Ngannou Tyson Fury fight, the one that he never talked about before. Yeah, if Tyson Fury would have showed up and he would actually train. I called this last week. I said if Francis Ngannou loses, this is going to be the go-to narrative. Tyson Fury didn't take him seriously, and Tyson Fury should have done the same thing to Francis Ngannou. Dana White, radio silence when Ngannou goes out there and drops one of the best boxers in the world, the heavyweight champ, takes him to a decision where I believe Ngannou was robbed, but either way, very close and competitive. Nothing to say. Wait till a guy falls and then kick dirt on him when he's on the ground. What an embarrassment this media member is for saying, what you make of the more violent knockout? Like, what kind of dumb question is that? And then Dana with a shit-eating grin.
That's probably the way that fight would have ended, too. I mean, listen, the crossover, you know how I feel about crossovers into boxing, and that's how they end, just like that. So there you go. That's how they end, just like that. Francis Ngannou, had Tyson Fury actually trained, that fight would have ended in a brutal KO as well because Francis Ngannou had no chance there. But luckily, after this, I was thinking, you know what? I remember a post-fight interview from Dana White way back when for Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor, where Dana was just riding Conor into the ground off of a loss, a KO loss against a 40 to 41-year-old Floyd Mayweather. I can't remember. I think he was almost 41 at the time they boxed. Keep in mind, Floyd Mayweather much smaller than Conor McGregor, and Floyd Mayweather on the tail end of his career. Keep in mind, since then, Floyd Mayweather has gone to draws with a Logan Paul. I looked up his record, draw with Logan Paul. But watch Dana, the way he acts at the post-fight press conference of Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor, and watch the way he just simps over Conor. And I know there's going to be someone down in the comments. Of course he's going to do it. It's his fighter. But I'm just saying, watch how hypocritical it is. And there's one line in here that I could not believe he said. I did not remember specifically him saying this direct quote. I remember him saying something along this. It directly contradicts something he said in another post-fight presser that we're going to look at from about 6 months ago after we look at this Floyd Mayweather, Conor McGregor post-fight presser. We're going to start off with him referencing stats to tell you how good Conor McGregor did against Floyd Mayweather. Keep in mind, Floyd Mayweather and Floyd Mayweather's team came out and said, oh, we didn't train for Conor at all. We were carrying Conor in the fight, which I 100% believe, by the way. Also, this was Conor's first boxing match. He got stopped by a smaller, old Floyd Mayweather, but no shame in that. Floyd Mayweather is one of the best boxers in the world. Francis Ngannou went against the best of the best twice. They were in their primes. One was a heavyweight champion. So massive difference here, and listen to the way, because Dana got a cut of Conor McGregor's purse,
and Conor McGregor is still with the UFC, instead of wanting to go out there and do things on his own and achieve his dreams, look at the way Dana acts here for Conor.
I'm so proud of Conor tonight, man. You know, it's not the fight that I thought it was going to be. It was a completely different fight than I expected. You know, Conor, when you get into professional boxing, right? And, you know, you guys know you start 4 rounds, you fight 6 rounds. He went 10 rounds tonight with arguably the greatest to ever do it.
He went 10 rounds tonight with arguably the greatest to ever do it. Well, talk about that. Talk about that for Francis Ngannou. Went 12 rounds, right? I don't know if it was 10 rounds or 12 rounds. I think it was 10 rounds against Fury, too. I can't remember for sure. Either way, Francis Ngannou went to a decision. He didn't get stopped. He didn't get TKO'd. I think it was 12. I don't know. But either way, didn't get stopped, dropped him, arguably won it. And I know Dana White's not going to say anything special about it, but I'm just saying, look at the stark contrast. It just goes to show you Dana doesn't mean what he says. He's a flat-out hypocrite and a liar. But listen to this some more.
Max Kellerman, I've been trying to get a hold of him. He ain't answering his phone right now, but he said that Conor wouldn't land one punch on Floyd Mayweather. You know, there were a lot of people that were super negative about, you know, this boxing match with Floyd, and Conor looked unbelievable.
Conor looked unbelievable getting stopped by a 41-year-old who's smaller than him in a different sport. And I understand, you have to understand, I understand Dana's using it to elevate Conor, but that's my point. Dana used McGregor versus Mayweather, even in Conor's loss, a moment to promote Conor. He used it as, you know, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for it is. He used it as a symbolic win for Conor. Well, he may not have actually won. He may have got stopped, but look how well he did. And he could have done the same thing with Francis Ngannou. Imagine Francis Ngannou going out there against Tyson Fury and then coming back to fight John Jones. Imagine that. He could have done the same thing with Francis Ngannou, but he didn't.
I'm sure you guys probably already saw this, but if you didn't, the CompuBox numbers were...
By the way, he's referencing stats here. He's cheerleading Conor landing some shots on Floyd Mayweather.
In 9 of Floyd Mayweather's fights, where it went 12 rounds, his opponents hit him with less than 100 punches. Conor hit him with 111 in less than 10 rounds. So it was a great fight. I'm really proud of Conor.
That's still my boy. And then, not the next one, but we're going to look at 2 more clips from this one. And this next one is just him kind of riding Conor a little bit more here. But then the next one, it's going to be hilarious where you see where I go after the next clip, after this one.
Conor was in here landing jabs on Floyd Mayweather.
He landed a jab in a boxing match. Oh, my God. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think, you know, I didn't watch the Conor Mayweather live, but sure, Conor went out there and got paid, and he went out there and competed against Floyd Mayweather. The point of this video isn't the shit on Conor here. It's just saying, look how the way Dana's twisting himself in the pretzels to congratulate Conor on a TKO loss, while then making excuses for why Francis did well against Tyson Fury, where he arguably won. And then the situation was kind of similar because Mayweather didn't train for Conor, supposedly. Tyson Fury didn't train for Conor, which is just a built-in excuse to say, oh, he looked like shit, and that's the only reason Francis Ngannou had any success.
Hitting him with right hands. He hit him with a big uppercut. Hitting him with nice body shots. Conor McGregor looked damn good tonight to me. I don't know what everybody else thinks, but I thought he looked awesome, and I'm proud of him.
I thought he looked awesome, and I'm proud of him. Just twist himself into pretzels to congratulate him, which, again, I understand. But this next clip, I could not believe it. I am glad I went and pulled this up and found it and found exactly what he said, because this just makes him look like a total hypocrite and just proves everything he says about Francis Ngannou is just a way to shape the narrative and is completely devoid of logic. I want you to listen closely to this clip here.
Conor McGregor is a rare, special individual, man. He's an incredible fighter. He's willing to put everything on the line. It's like
he's willing to put everything on the line. Remember that. And he goes into it a little bit more.
I say all the time, without any risk, there is no great reward. You must, you know, the greats always risk.
The greats always risk. Without a great risk, there's no reward. McGregor risked it all. He risked it all.
And Conor McGregor is that guy. He's a very special individual. I think if he would have started boxing, he'd have probably been very well. I mean, how can we even debate it? How can we even talk about it? He just went 10 rounds, 10 really good rounds with Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, so did Logan Paul. Logan Paul went to a draw with him. So anyway, the point of that last clip is McGregor risked it all against Mayweather. Oh my God, that's so crazy. He went to another sport and he risked it all. Let me take you back. Let me take you back to another post-fight presser from Dana White. And we're just going to go through, like, there's like 2.5 minutes here. But it just shows how much of a hypocrite Dana White is. And he's just pissed that Francis Ngannou did what's best for him. And everyone rewriting history and rehashing the narrative and saying Francis really messed up. Francis made $30 million at least from 2 boxing matches. Boxing was his dream. People are saying it hurt his legacy. And I want to make this point. Francis Ngannou did nothing but help his legacy with the Tyson Fury match and with the Anthony Joshua match. Because his legacy will be, he was one of the best UFC heavyweights of all time, a former heavyweight champion who never lost a belt, and then went into heavyweight boxing and went toe-to-toe with the heavyweight champ. But that's not it. That's not it. He was a trailblazer for the sport. The reason Conor McGregor doesn't have a fight announced right now is because of Francis Ngannou. Conor McGregor wants to fight out his deal because he wants to go box. Francis Ngannou is inspiring fighter after fighter after fighter to try to do the same thing Ngannou did. Not necessarily just go to boxing, but they're looking at the deal he got from PFL and they're thinking, well, maybe I can do that. There's other people we already know, or at least are rumored to have been offered deals from PFL. So Dana's pissed at Francis Ngannou, and the reason he's paying Chael Sonnen to be a shill is because they wanted Ngannou to be a cautionary tale, but Ngannou went out there and made $30 million in 2 boxing matches. $30 million in 2 boxing matches. That is absolutely insane. That's more money. He made more money versus Anthony Joshua, $20 million, maybe more, than any disclosed purse the UFC has ever paid Conor in his entire career. Flat. Conor made more money for the Floyd Mayweather match, but that's the type of life-changing generational wealth we're talking about for Francis Ngannou. But let's listen to what he had to say before Ngannou was ever scheduled to fight Tyson Fury, because some of these lines do not age well at all, and then also it's just massively hypocritical.
Based on what I know about the deal, which is not much, it makes no sense to me. I mean, you're going to pay.
Based on what he knows about the PFL deal, it makes no sense to him. Well, it doesn't need to make sense to you. It's not your business.
A guy not to fight for a year, and it's already been like 18 months. He's fought 3 times in the last 3 years.
He's fought 3 times in the last 3 years. Once, 1 year or year and a half was because of an ACL tear. The other years was because you were icing him, actively icing him. It's publicly documented that Francis Ngannou was begging for fights, and you were icing him because he was trying to fight out his deal, what you're doing to Conor McGregor right now.
It's just not what we do here. It's not what we do. And the day that we released him,
they did not release him. Francis Ngannou used the sunset clause to get out of his contract, another narrative that Dana and his sycophants keep regurgitating.
I knew exactly what was going to happen. And Francis wants to take 0 risks. Francis
wants to take 0 risk. Oh, well, that's awfully funny because Conor risked it all against Floyd Mayweather. But Francis Ngannou wants to take 0 risk. Total hypocrite, totally devoid of logic.
Doesn't want to take any chances.
Doesn't want to take any chances. He turned down, in Dana White's words, the biggest UFC heavyweight contract ever offered, more than Brock Lesnar. And he went out there and, I mean, just put it to shame with the PFL deal and all the incentives he got, and also the ability to go out and box, which was a dream of his. And people keep saying legacy this and legacy that. If you think Francis Ngannou is worried about his UFC legacy, you know, you're just insane. His legacy is already set in stone, one. But what would you choose? Let me ask you guys this: if you can work a job making $50,000 a year, but you get more legacy, or you can work a job making $10 million a year, but you don't get all that legacy, which are you going to choose? Because I know what I'm choosing.
And he obviously didn't want to take a chance against John Jones. And after we saw what happened with Cyril Gane, you know, I don't blame him. I think the outcome would have been exactly the same.
This is the same guy like 6 months prior when he was negotiating with John Jones. He was saying that John Jones is going to move down to middleweight because of Francis Ngannou. He's scared of Francis Ngannou, essentially. I'm paraphrasing, but you get the point.
And I'm sure most of you do, and I'm sure Francis does too.
Nobody spoke up here. Shame on the MMA media. I'd be like, no, I want to see that fight. Everyone wants to see that fight.
You know, and the media makes it sound like that I'm saying that he's afraid of him. I don't think that he's afraid of anybody. It's just the fact that he doesn't want to take any risk.
He doesn't want to take any risk. It literally makes no sense. He left the UFC, turned down a deal from the UFC that was supposedly such a lucrative deal, and he went out there to try to compete in boxing because that's what his dream was. He wanted to compete in boxing. He always dreamed of it. He talked about it before he was UFC heavyweight champion. So not taking any risk, and now he gets flatline KO'd by one of the best boxers in the world in Anthony Joshua, who's not a 41-year-old on the tail end of his career, much smaller than him. That's not what he's doing. He's taking on the best of the best in boxing.
Wants to, PFL's going to pay this guy to train for a boxing match that may not even happen and that they might not even be involved in.
Basically, I would never let somebody under my roster box unless I'm getting a substantial cut of their purse.
How does that make any sense? It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, Anthony Joshua called it a gimmick fight this week.
Anthony Joshua wasn't calling it a gimmick fight 2 weeks ago now. He wasn't calling it a gimmick fight then. And what's hilarious is this is right after he announced the BMF title fight. This is while he's hearing that Ngannou's getting close to the Tyson Fury fight, and he's trying to lure Tyson Fury to box John Jones instead or fight John Jones in MMA. So he doesn't do gimmick fights. He does gimmick fights all the time.
When asked about that fight, he's like, I'm focused on fighting the best guys in the world. I'm not interested in a gimmick fight right now. And that's one of the big problems with boxing right now is it's all about these gimmicky type fights. And that's just not what I do here. It's not what I do.
BMF title fight on UFC 300, gimmick fight, literally WWE belt.
I put on fights with the best fighters in the world and fights that people want to see. Francis could have done a deal here. Hunter threw the kitchen sink at that guy, Hunter went to more dinners with Francis Ngannou.
Oh, no, he bought him dinners. How could he turn down our deal and make double in one fight? Oh, we treated him to dinners. By the way, they basically offered Francis Ngannou like $9 million, okay? He's going to make more than that with PFL. He made $20 million against Anthony Joshua. And keep in mind, people keep saying, oh, $9 million. He could have made this plus pay-per-view buys. Pay-per-view buys isn't that much, okay? Regardless, I did the math before. Even if it sells over like 1 million pay-per-view buys, it's going to be an extra like $1 million or $2 million bucks max, okay? So the fact that people are like, oh yeah, he could have got $9 million from the UFC here. He's making the same in boxing and ruining his legacy, blah, blah, blah. No, he's making substantially more. And if he would have lost in the UFC, they would have revised his contract, or his contract was only $9 million when he was the champion. Plus, he's only getting pay-per-view points when he's champion. So he might get $9 million plus pay-per-view points. He loses the belt, which could happen. Then he's going to drop down to $2 million or $3 million maybe in his contract. So people saying he should have done it in the UFC. He could have lost in the UFC, so he gets knocked out in the UFC for $9 million or loses in the UFC for $9 million, or he can get knocked out by one of the best boxers in the world while attempting to achieve his dream for $20 million plus.
And did everything in his power to try to get this fight done. And, Francis just thinks that he's in a position where he's got some Conor McGregor Mayweather fight on his hands, which he does not.
Need I even touch that? I mean, Ngannou versus Joshua or Ngannou versus Fury isn't the same level, but Ngannou made about the same as much as Conor McGregor made for the Mayweather fight. I don't remember the exact numbers, and Conor had some more sponsors and whatnot. But either way, Ngannou got paid substantially more for boxing.
That fight was like a once-in-a-lifetime type deal. Fight that I wasn't very interested in. But at the end of the day, it became so big. The right guys, the right time, the right place. The fans wanted it. So we did it, and we got it done.
By the way, I hate crossover fights to begin with. I only bought Francis Ngannou's boxing matches to show him support since the MMA community consistently crapped on him for no reason.
MMA guys versus boxers doesn't make any sense to me.
So there you go. That's pretty much the gist of Dana White. And the point of this video is just to show the massive hypocrisy of Dana White here. It's like, oh, Conor was so brave taking on 41-year-old or 40-year-old Floyd Mayweather out of his prime, who's much smaller than him. But yeah, if Tyson Fury wouldn't have ate himself, then yeah, that fight wouldn't have been competitive. But he never talked about it before. He waited to kick a man while he was down, and I think it's a disgrace. And I think it's a disgrace the way the MMA community, a large portion, waited literal years for Ngannou to have a misstep. and it just didn't come, and they kept continuing to move the goalpost and move the goalpost and move the goalpost and move the goalpost. And I knew, and I covered it in a video last week, long before Francis Ngannou got knocked out by Anthony Joshua, I knew the second he had a stumble, it was going to be narrative after narrative after narrative after narrative of why Francis, you know, he shouldn't even had been competitive against Tyson Fury, and he had no chance against Anthony Joshua, and now he's ruined his legacy, and he should have stayed with the UFC, he could have boxed John Jones, and so on and so forth. And I just think it's a disgrace that Dana White was radio silence when Francis Ngannou's having his successful, you know, having his success with signing a PFL deal and boxing Tyson Fury and getting the matchup with Anthony Joshua. Never asked about any of that. The second Ngannou gets KO'd, all of a sudden everyone wants to ask Dana White, and he wants to have that shit-eating grin on his face, just smiling from ear to ear, so satisfied that Francis Ngannou finally got KO'd. But guess what? He got KO'd for $20 million, generational wealth. He still has opportunities in boxing, and he also still has the PFL deal to fall back on, which is more than the UFC was willing to pay him, and it's guaranteed. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching.